Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to our LinkedIn Live, Locations and Talent Strategy, where today we will be talking about nearshoring to Costa Rica. We have a great set of panelists on the LinkedIn Live today, and we are expecting a good number of people to join us on the LinkedIn Live. So if you have already joined, please let us know from where you are joining today, and we'll start with the introductions in a minute or so. Okay, if you're joining right now, please let us know from where you're joining and what you would like to hear today. We definitely have a set agenda in mind, but we are very open to taking up questions from the audience. So feel free to chime in with your questions and who you are and where you are joining from today. Okay, so let's maybe start with the introduction. I'll go first. My name is Sakshi Garg. I'm a vice president with Everest Group. I lead our locations and workforce optimization practice and have been with the firm for 12 years. In this practice, we help our clients with location related decisions through both the membership model and the custom research model and provide the expertise that our clients need to make their location and workforce related decisions. Anna, do you want to go next?
Yes, thank you, Sashi. My name is Ana Romero. I'm the lead for the services sector at CINDE, the Costa Rican Investment Promotion Agency. So thank you very much, Everest Group, for inviting us. I've been with the organization for 15 years, so I've seen a lot of the evolution of the whole sector. So happy to be here and happy to hear your questions and see how we can interact more with the companies and the people that are joining us today. So thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Nice to have you here and looking forward to hearing your expertise. Christian, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, good evening, good night, everybody. My name is Christian Rodriguez, based out of Costa Rica, and I have the pleasure and privilege of leading the shared services organization for Bacardi Limited, a family-owned spirits company. And based in Costa Rica, over 25 years of experience in shared services, BPO, and the call center industry, and currently managing over 400 people in 21 countries that provide shared services operations to Bacardi. So great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Parul, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks, Sakshi. Parul Jain this side. I'm a vice president with Everest Group. Along with Sakshi, I look after our locations and workforce practice. Based in the Gurgaon office for Everest Group, overall, I bear a decade of industry experience, specifically in the global services domain, and look forward to today's discussion.
Great. And I'm seeing we have people joining us from Canada, different parts of the US, Brazil, India, Manila. I'm sure it's late for you guys, but thank you for joining the session. So I think we can get started and feel free to guys keep on asking questions in the chat. We will be taking up the audience questions during the LinkedIn Live. Maybe let's start with the overview of the industry, global services industry in Costa Rica. And Parul, why don't you take us through the overall industry and how does it look?
Sure. So Costa Rica is one of the most mature service delivery locations when you talk about the Latin American and Caribbean region, right? Already close to more than 106,000 FTEs, which in revenue terms translates to close to $6.9 million. Now, what we have seen is that over the years, the market in Costa Rica has kind of grown with, shown solid growth fundamentals. And if you compare the growth in the last 3 or 4 years, it's almost comparable to what we are seeing in the overall global services ecosystem as well. Particularly, if you talk about Costa Rica, most of the market is concentrated in San Jose and Heredia, and both cities are almost 20, 25 minutes apart. So that's like the main hub for the business activity. In terms of sourcing mix, I think this is one of the unique locations where we see a heavier share of, almost 60% with GBS or shared services
Mhm.
or GIT's in-house model. The share for service providers is also increasing gradually. So that's one thing I actually wanted to ask. Anna, could you also comment around the evolution of scale, the kind of growth the market has seen, particularly from an IT-BPO standpoint?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, definitely we are seeing a consistent growth in the shared services BPO industry. What you were saying about shared services, definitely the major footprint will be GBS centers, so captive operations that have established operations in Costa Rica. I think this evolution and what we see in the market today and the type of companies, and we have a very good example here with Bacardi, is the maturity that and the experience that the market can actually deliver. So definitely this growth and these past 5 years have shown an important growth. And since 1999 that we have the first companies arriving in Costa Rica like PNG, Western Union, and others, definitely we're seeing that consistent growth and the type of operations that they bring into the country. So the market experience, as I was saying, is one of the most important companies that are coming to Costa Rica now in these new days are looking for the whole growth of the market and the experience that the market has already created, the type of labor force that we have been able to put together in order to set up an operation. So the experience in processes, also in the language capabilities that you're able to find in the country, but also on the multifunctional processes that you can deliver from a location like Costa Rica. So definitely we see a growth in less transactional, more high value added processes. And that's one of the major trends that I wanted to highlight. So even though companies come first for very transactional functions at the very beginning when they set up their first service center operation, definitely we are seeing a huge evolution on how they can add more value and leverage the talent availability that they're able, or the talent skills that they're able to find in a location like ours. We're seeing also an increase in the complexity of the functions and also the vision that each one of these companies has on how they position the service center in time as a helper, shaper, and more of a leader in this type of organization. So we're seeing how more of the decisions or the data that is coming out of these service centers is helping organizations take decisions at a core level and using the GBS center located in Costa Rica. One important thing is that I mentioned multifunctional. That's mainly what we're seeing today. That's the type of growth from the companies that are here. They start with finance operations, but we're seeing an evolution to a more multifunctional. So we're seeing an increase in demand in HR functions, for example. Procurement is also an area where we see a lot of growth. And also we see well, I mentioned procurement, sales, for example, sales operations and data analytics as part of the main areas of interest to bring into Costa Rica. Always in a goal to leverage the talent that it's available, and actually seeing a transition from a GBS operation, which is also that is what most of the companies are looking for and generate a lot of economies and savings. But not only savings, is also how they streamline the processes. The last thing that I wanted to mention is how we're seeing an evolution less to actually to move forward into a capability center. So how we can leverage more the talent that is available in Costa Rica and how they can retool the talent that it's in the country and that they already have captive in their operations to bring more processes that are high value added. And probably, I don't know if Christian wants to add a little bit there on what has been their experience in Costa Rica in this evolution, but definitely a nice and a very strong story to tell.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great. Christian, if you could maybe start with why did you choose Costa Rica as location in your portfolio and what has been your experience? I think that'll be a good segue into probably the next section.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So the decision to set up the operation in Costa Rica was made for Bacardi approximately 10 years ago. I've been with the company 7.5, so I joined the company when the operation was already up and running. This was totally a greenfield operation for Bacardi because the company didn't even have a sales office in Costa Rica. So this was completely new territory for Bacardi. Actually, I was working for a different company back then. And as part of the due diligence, Cindy brought Bacardi to the company that I was working for, which is a very common practice here in Costa Rica. So we share best practices and some tips on setting up an operation in Costa Rica. The reason was the same really as many other companies, which was looking for savings, labor arbitrage, and generate some efficiencies from a process perspective. But as Anna said, that very quickly transformed into the quest for higher quality, higher added value services, to the point that our KPIs, our SLAs today are so much better than they ever were in the original locations where the services were provided from. Yes, there's a cost saving element to it, but it would be naive to think that Costa Rica is the cheapest place on earth to do some of these services, especially the higher volume, lower complexity. Um, but the talent here, and again, I've been doing this for over 25 years, having global operations. So the talent here is very unique in terms of what I would call the intellectual curiosity that people have, and they don't stick or they don't just stay still following an SOP. We do follow SOPs, but very quickly people start questioning and asking, how can we do this better? How can we do this differently? And that's where the value really comes from. Eh, Anna alluded to some different models from a service delivery standpoint. So typically, a company would have a site maybe in Manila, a site in India, a site in Eastern Europe, and a site in Costa Rica, and then all of them reporting to global headquarters. Right? In our particular case, it's different because we have sites in Delhi, in Shanghai, in Barcelona. We just opened up a site in Warsaw and the site in Costa Rica, but the entire global operation for shared services reports into Costa Rica. So we, as Anna said, we make global decisions based here. The global leadership team, for the most part, is based here. And actually, we've been able to export talent from Costa Rica to some of the other sites that we have. So there's a lot of people who were here that are now in Barcelona, for instance, in the UK. Our site leader in Warsaw came from our site in Costa Rica. So as you can see, there's a clear evolution in terms of added value, complexity, and decision-making levels that we have here after having been attracted to Costa Rica initially just for the cost savings that initially was the objective.
Christian, maybe Ramesh, thank you for your questions. I'm seeing on the live chat here some questions from Ramesh, and actually from the location perspective, did Bacardi had some experience? Because from my experience, when we received Bacardi, they already knew about Costa Rica at some point. They were looking at Costa Rica, probably they were looking at another location. Do you have any background on that?
Actually, the knowledge the company had of Costa Rica was very anecdotal. Let's remember Bacardi is a family-owned company that was born in Cuba in 1862. So as Latin American countries, the Bacardi family knew about Costa Rica, but that's it. I mean, and I understand some Bacardi family members lived in Costa Rica for a short time after the revolution in Cuba, but that was it. So from a business perspective, they looked at some point at Mexico, Colombia, and Costa Rica to set up operations. And I have to say, that Cindy's role in showcasing the advantages and the features of Costa Rica as a good place to do business was critical in the company making the decision. There was a previous attempt at a shared services operation located in Coral Gables in Florida, which is a very unlikely place to do shared services and very expensive. But very quickly, the advantages of setting up in Costa Rica were clear.
Yeah, thank you, Christian. Actually, I wanted to add to that, to the comment to Ramesh, and also to his question that was posted before that one in regards to the maturity. And I think that's a very good example. For example, when we're referring to the maturity, is the knowledge that the country already has in terms of shared services, in terms of processes, and in terms of also the knowledge that the talent pool has in actually the implementation of a service center. So for Bacardi, actually, when they were making the decision, that also was part of the consideration. They needed to move fast. They needed to start the operation of the shared services really fast. And the maturity of the market helped to make that decision because they needed people that were already trained in how to bring out a process, how to optimize that process, and so on. So definitely that's the maturity we're talking about, is that knowledge that the country already has in shared services organizations.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks for clarifying. Christian, one question. Both you and Anna mentioned multiple times high complexity work, value added work. Maybe it would be good to give some examples of the type of high complexity work that you are doing from your center, because I think that will make it much more clearer for the audience in terms of what are the
Sure.
capabilities of the location.
Sure. Perhaps one of the best examples is in the accounting area. Typically, companies when they set up in Costa Rica, they bring general ledger, project accounting, some of those basic accounting tasks to Costa Rica first. That was our case as well. But for instance, today, I would say approximately 97 to 98% of all accounting and financial transactions that are required to complete our fiscal year end, which is in March 31st each year, are completed here in Costa Rica. And so we've been, I would say, crawling up the value chain when it comes to financial consolidation, financial statements, creation, commentaries, etc. And there are legal reasons why the actual release of the financial statements is made in Bermuda, our global headquarters. But all of the work leading up to the final release of the financial statements and the P&Ls and the financial results is done here in Costa Rica. That's something that we never thought we would do way back then when I joined. Maybe another good example is our payroll practice. 5 or 6 years ago, we didn't even have an idea we were going to do payroll for the company. And now we do payroll for approximately 30 countries from Costa Rica, including headquarters. So our top executives, including Mahesh, our CEO, get paid not from Costa Rica, but the payroll is processed in Costa Rica. And luckily, we've had no complaints, at least from our CEO so far. So.
Awesome. Another question around talent. We're talking about ease of availability of skills. So I'm assuming there are some skills which might be slightly harder to find. So let's make it very transparent for the audience. And if you can talk about what skills are relatively easily available and what skills might be challenging to find, and how are some of the skill building initiatives being aligned to probably close that skill gap?
Okay, thank you, Sashi. So definitely in terms of the skill sets, the low-hanging fruits that you will be able to find in Costa Rica, definitely finance, like Christian was saying, finance and accounting, all the HR roles and procurement, we're seeing a growth in that. And definitely there's a full scheme around talent development that we will probably go on that a little bit further on this conversation, but definitely finance, financial positions, HR, procurement, IT positions also will be areas where you will be able to find talent. We have to also understand that Costa Rica, compared to other locations, we're a small size country and a small market in terms of the size of the labor pool, but also the size of the talent pool. So definitely you will find resources that are very specialized, and the market has been able to train those resources in time. Okay. Now, when we talk of what resources we are not able to find in Costa Rica, I don't like the word we're not able to find, because from my experience, and also Christian can tell you a little bit from his experience, is that most companies are looking for very rare profiles, and they're actually finding them in Costa Rica, not in very large amounts, but actually they're profiles that we thought we would not be able to find in Costa Rica, and actually they exist in Costa Rica. So that is one interesting fact about the country. Now, when we get into very niche, for example, IT functions, where people need to have a very specific certification, where it's a profile that is very custom made to the organization, probably that's where it gets a little bit more difficult. And when we add years of experience, and that's one of the areas where we have seen more complexity when companies are coming in, and where we have to do a little bit of damage control, is setting up the expectations of the companies that, okay, you're arriving to a market that it's young in the population that is actually working with you. So probably the number of years of experience that you will be able to find in a location, for example, like the US, is not the same as the people that are working here in Costa Rica. So when we add very niche capabilities in IT, for example, very specific, and then we add years of experience, then that could be somehow difficult. However, companies are starting to get more flexible. It's very important that they understand what is that the programs that the universities actually graduate and what the people learn. Because one of the major mistakes is that they tend to staff exactly the same profile that they have in other locations, missing out some of the capabilities that actually the market delivers. So it's very important for a company, no matter what location they're looking at, is to understand very well what are the profiles that are coming out from the universities at that location to better fit the profiles to their needs. So that is one of the recommendations that I have there.
And a one question. So when you talked about tenured talent specifically for some of the roles, is the complexity more for some of the operation roles or for more of the tech roles? If you were to draw some differences between the two broad categories, right? If I'm clubbing, say, finance, procurement, all of that in one business process services cluster and everything related to tech, IT, ADM, digital in one cluster, where do you see more challenge or more ease?
So definitely in both you're able to find talent. What I'm saying it definitely will be depending on the profile and the expertise that they need to have, or certifications or degrees that they need to comply with to be able to perform. Now, definitely in the areas more operational, like in the more finance, procurement, and HR roles, I think we have a larger pool of talent. I think where we have more work to do is definitely in IT when it gets too specific, right? When it gets to technologies that are very new. For example, we're just launching specializations in cybersecurity, specializations in AI, because these are new areas where we need to start to catch up and start to develop talent, because most of our companies are looking for that talent. But probably these are people that will not have the experience that probably you will find in other markets. Another area where we see challenges probably is in data scientists, for example. We do have careers in data analytics, in everything that has to do with data, but definitely to find a data scientist with 10 years of experience probably will be something that will be complicated for us.
Got it, got it. Um, let's talk about attrition, because I think that's a very, very important topic, which has been a pain point for a lot of global services stakeholders in the past year. We had some attrition numbers on the slide, so if you can bring those up. But the question is, Christian, to you, since you manage multiple different locations, how do you see the attrition comparison between Costa Rica and other locations? And what are some of the strategies that have worked in your favor as far as managing and controlling attrition in Costa Rica?
Yeah, sure. So you have the numbers up on the screen in our area, which is, let's say, administrative and IT share services. That number is right. It's between 9 and 11% as an average here in Costa Rica. We're happy to report that we particularly are in the lower range of attrition, but it wasn't that way always, right? So when I joined the company, it was closer to 45% on an annualized basis. Now you have to understand, when I first joined the company, we were in year one of the operation, and as expected, the first year, 2 years tend to be very complicated, and a lot of people burn out and just decide to leave. As I compare attrition to the other markets where we have operations, I have to say Costa Rica is probably a little higher. India, it's essentially zero. Barcelona is very low. Warsaw is a brand new operation, so it's too early for us to gauge that. We've only been up and running since September of last year. So in a nutshell, yes, Costa Rica's attrition is a little higher, but it also has to do with how sophisticated the market is and how, for such a small country, there's only 5.5 million people here total. There's plenty of career opportunities for people to move from one company to the other. So the trick and the magic is in developing a culture and developing an environment where people are going to want to stay with you, for longer periods of time. Right?
Yeah, I think I like Christian's comments, because definitely we do have attrition in Costa Rica, and definitely attrition can be seen in many different ways. there's a lot that has to do with how the company actually supports and engages their employees within the operation. So definitely a lot of the attrition, when we see high levels of attrition, there's something behind that is not necessarily just Costa Rican the market itself. It's also the company that has to engage more with their employees and has to do some adjustments to their compensations or how to engage the employees within the organization and what are the career paths that they're giving their employees. So definitely that has to do a lot with the levels of attrition that each company has. Now, given the maturity of the market, people like to be challenged. So definitely that's why the importance of diversifying the type of functions that the service centers actually deliver from Costa Rica so that you can promote and have a career path for your people within the organization. That's also very important. The other thing that I wanted to highlight is that we're seeing different trends in this. So we just returned from the pandemic. A lot of people were onboarded during the pandemic. So these are people that were onboarded online on a virtual model and never touched the office. So they have no engagement or any connection with their organization. So now that we're returning back to some kind of hybrid model in Costa Rica, definitely that is starting to create some kind of community within the organizations. So it makes it more difficult for people to leave, or at least they will think it twice if they leave or not. Also, I think we will see a change in the attrition model, probably not very high, but it will affect, is that even though all these economic downturns that are happening today are making people think whether they move or not. So we probably will have some kind of um, leveling of the attrition, at least for these 2 years to come, because people will tend to think if they move or not from the organization they're in. So I think the economics, the macroeconomics also support and help on the behavior of the attrition, but there's a lot of work that companies actually need to do internally to retain and also to keep the good talent that they have within their organizations. Okay.
I
Can
agree, Anna. And the point around attrition probably tapering off or cooling down for some bit, I think that's evident across multiple geographies. Good to know that's the same case with Costa Rica as well. I think there are a couple of questions that have come up. If you could start with one of them. So we've got a question from Cesar Hernandez. And Anna, this is a question straight here. So how long do we think it'll take Costa Rica to develop a talent pool that can attend the demand for highly specialized IT profiles?
Well, we will need to understand a little bit more on the profiles, but definitely, so depend. I don't know if they already have operations in Costa Rica, but definitely we do have a organization, so academia that is prepared to train the talent pool in IT. So we do have that. And then we have a very good resource, which is the technical high schools. And we are putting a lot of effort in terms of changing the specializations that the technical high schools actually provide to actually focus in more IT areas. So like I mentioned, this year we will have our first batch of 18-year-olds graduating from cybersecurity from a technical high school. So these are 18-year-old kids that will be already ready to work in cybersecurity. And then we launched last year the one in artificial intelligence. So how long it's going to take, it will all depend also on the market, but we're already putting together the pieces on how we can train the talent in IT. We already have the infrastructure because we have very good universities like Tech of Costa Rica, and then we have the UCR. We have other universities, private universities like ULatina, ULACIT. We have Senfotec, which are also training the market in IT. Now, what is important is how we collaborate with the companies. So a lot of these companies like Bacardi, but many others, IBM, Intel, and others that are here are supporting these programs and are helping us to develop what is needed in the market so that we can actually encourage the academia to train in the specifics that the companies are requiring. I don't know if I answered the question, but it's going to take time, definitely, because we need to train the people. But we are also creating programs that are more short term so that we can deliver resources that could actually attend the needs of the organizations.
So there is a
Thanks.
question from Esteban. Christian, maybe if you can answer that. And Ketan, I know you have a couple of questions. We are coming to the next section, but before we move, Esteban's question is around attrition rate. And Christian, I guess you've partly answered it, but maybe if you can directly address the question in terms of how are you competing with the bigger players who are already in the market in terms of attrition.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the market has matured very, very much in the last few years, right? So if you had asked me this question 10, 15 years ago, I probably would have said it's terrible, right? And we are cannibalizing each other's resources, and this is an all-out war for talent. But that's not the case right now, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, as Anna said, the educational infrastructure in Costa Rica is so solid that they're able to produce new professionals and new let's say experts at the rate that we for the most part need in most fields, right? And then the other thing is that the younger Costa Rican population is tending more and more to get into the fields that are attractive for the services companies in Costa Rica. So maybe you'll see less people go into traditional fields like education, law, medicine, sociology, etc., psychology, right? Which are fields that are still very important, but maybe don't have the career potential that some of the fields have, right? So today, I have to say that we are in a healthy competition for talent. It used to happen that the new entrant in the market would disrupt the market with insane wages and benefits. That's not the case anymore. Not only, again, because the market can accommodate everybody, but also because of the economic realities that we're living in right. So it would be suicidal for somebody to set up a new operation in Costa Rica and all of a sudden get out of what has been the norm from a compensation perspective. So I hope that answers the question.
Great.
I'm seeing a lot of very interesting questions. If we could, I would like to take this one from Ketan, if it's okay,
Yep,
Sashi.
sure.
So,
Ethan has two questions. Which one are you taking up? Yep.
so yeah, that one. So, okay, yes, perfect. So, Ketan, thank you very much for your question. Definitely seen that as a Costa Rican investment promotion agency. So we are an NGO. We're not part of the government, even though we're the right arm of the government in terms of the attraction of foreign direct investment. So how we can help? Actually, we can help in different areas. So first on the assessment, so definitely support the company on how to understand why Costa Rica and why Costa Rica will be the right location, providing the company with all the data that they require in order to make the assessment, right? And when they're comparing different countries, so get the data from Costa Rica and make the comparisons that are needed, right? So that's one part of what we can help. Once also we can provide a tour, like an agenda where the company comes and does a site visit, so we can coordinate that, meet with different stakeholders of the industry, academia, peer companies that are already here, like we're already sharing some of the experience that the companies have had in the country, but also understanding the legalities of establishing an operation in Costa Rica. Actually, CINDE will help on the whole process. And then once the company has decided on, yes, I want to go to Costa Rica, this is the right decision, then we help on the follow-up of the establishment of the operation. So it will take the time that the company needs to make the decision. But then once the decision is made, we will set up a timetable of what will be the time frames that the company needs to accomplish to have a soft landing in the country. So definitely that's the type of support services that we can actually provide. Mm-hmm. And
Let me,
they have no
let me
cost.
add, let me add something. As a long-time stakeholder of Cindy across the many companies that I've worked for over 20 plus years, I think Anna is being a little modest because Cindy has been named the number one investment promotion agency globally. It's been twice already, right? Two times in a row. So this is objective confirmation that the work that they do. Yes, Costa Rica has some advantages and a few drawbacks for this type of operations, but Cindy has done a tremendous job of promoting and let's say showcasing those advantages to companies.
Yeah, thank you, Christian. Yes, we're very proud and to be the number one agency worldwide. Thank you.
Okay, let's take one more question coming from Guillermo, which is around
Mm-hmm.
the language availability. Christian, maybe if you could talk about, and Anna, you can also comment.
Yeah.
What are the different language skills that are available?
I think that's another factor why Costa Rica has been so successful. Actually, internally, I've been doing some scouting to expand operations in other Latin American countries, for instance, and the availability and quality of English, which is the first language we look for. Having a big country doesn't mean you're going to have a lot of high quality English speakers, right? Which is, let's say, something that happens in Costa Rica. So yes, you'll find a lot of high quality English. I think some of that is influenced by the fact that Costa Rica is also a very big tourism market. So a lot of people learn English, a lot of people speak English. In our particular case, we also deliver some services to Europe from here. So we have German, French, Italian, Portuguese, and then we were able to find Dutch, which I never thought I was going to be able to find in Costa Rica. It's only a couple of people, but that fills our needs. There was a time when we found Russian that again I never thought I was going to find in Costa Rica. And in previous companies, I was able to find Mandarin and Cantonese, for instance, at a limited level also to provide services to the Far East. So yeah, generally speaking, you find the languages you need, at least the most common European languages, and then the languages spoken in the Americas, which are English, Spanish, and Portuguese.
Great. I think the question stream is just not stopping. We know there are questions around cost, so maybe we can just talk a little bit about the cost, and then we'll pick up questions from Kashish, Rita, and a few other people who have asked questions. But let's talk a little bit about cost. And Parul, why don't you just touch upon a little bit, and then we'll take the first question that came from Ketan.
Sure, sure. So if you talk about the financials here, right, and what we're doing is trying to draw a comparison of Costa Rica, say with a source location like US, maybe a tier two location like Dallas. So the overall arbitrage varies anywhere between 35 to 60% depending on the service that we're looking at. So it's very high, if very attractive when you talk about contact center services. For technology services, it's a tad bit lower. However, very meaningful if you still compare to a lot of location options within US. And if you talk about how this is expected to change, so I think Costa Rica is one of the locations with nominal wage inflation compared to the other peer location in the region, which is about 4%. We've seen other locations with a highly varying kind of inflation or currency exchange. So this is one of the more stable locations. And Christian would like to get your comments on that also in terms of the impacting wage inflation, the currency changes, etc. How do you think that has played out? Do you see a lot of changes in that financial standpoint?
Yeah, so I would say for the last, I don't know, 5 to 7 years. So let me backtrack. Costa Rica used to be a high inflation country. And by high, I mean 12, 15, 20% way back then, right? But I would say for the last 5 to 7 years, it's been in the 3 to 5% range, and sometimes even lower. For instance, for this year, we are projecting our wage increase to be 4%. So as you said, it's let's say relatively nominal. Now, Costa Rica has something very particular, which is we are actually, in fact, a dual currency economy. So we do a lot of transactions both in US dollars and then the local currency, which is called the colon, right? And since late November, early December of last year, there's been an unusual phenomenon, which is the local currency appreciating itself. So that means an impact to us as a company, because obviously we bring dollars into the country and pay our employees in local currency, right? So we have, let's say, a relative disadvantage for the last couple of months, but that's cyclical. That this is the time of the year where most or more US dollars get into the economy, so that's expected. But then later in the year, that's going to correct itself. So that's how it's been for the last 5 to 7 years. I would say pretty stable, pretty easy to forecast.
Got it. And this also kind of links to the question we had from Ketan, right? Around if you were to draw a comparison, Christian, from other locations for Bacardi, right? How do the costs stack up? We know locations like India and some of the other offshore locations that are experiencing significantly higher wage inflation than 4%.
Yeah.
So what are your views on that?
So what I would say is that probably 80% of the people that we have, I would call operational roles. So analysts and team leads and subject matter experts that are actually in the trenches doing the high volume work day in and day out. So for that big mass of our people, uh, Costa Rica ranks obviously higher than India in terms of cost. That's obvious, but it's very comparable to, let's say, Shanghai at this point in time, cheaper than Poland, cheaper than Barcelona. That's where we have sites, right? And then as you get up the management chain, right? So team leads, supervisors, managers, senior managers, directors, etc., it gets more comparable, right? So I would say a senior manager or a director here costs pretty much the same as somebody in Barcelona or somebody in Poland. But these are people that have 150, 200 people in their teams, right? So we try to keep a balance between the sites in terms of we don't necessarily go always to the cheapest place, right? We need to find a balance between cost and quality. Um, but even when, as I said before, Costa Rica is not the cheapest place on earth to do this type of processes. At least for the places where we have our footprint today, Costa Rica is still very competitive, even at the lower levels of the organization.
Maybe if I may add there, I think Christian just pinpointed exactly. I think the Costa Rica is a location for companies that are looking that quality, that mix of that combination of factors. So definitely Costa Rica is not the cheapest location, but definitely for a company that is looking for the quality, for the stability, for all the different other things, and somehow an arbitrage with other locations, definitely Costa Rica starts to make sense. Definitely it has to be a combination between North America, so support to North America and other locations. LATAM probably, if we are just supporting LATAM, probably is not the cheapest locations. There are others. I think the language capability gives us an edge. We have a very good pool of talent with good language capabilities. Also, the possibility of serving Brazil out of Costa Rica gives an edge to most of the organizations. But actually, the process improvement and the efficiencies that you can get from a center in Costa Rica, you start seeing that cost cutting right along the line, right? It's not something that you have the cost savings right away, but you will start seeing how you optimize the whole organization with the knowledge and the maturity that the country can offer. Okay.
And like you touched upon this, and Kristen, you referred to it in the previous one of the questions as well around language availability and kind of, especially when it comes to English language. Can you also comment on the proficiency of the languages or the accent neutrality? Because that's another thing that a lot of our clients are also enterprise clients are interested in understanding. Am I going to get, say, B1, B2 proficiency, or is it going
Mhm.
to be C1, C2? So any comments on the language part that will also be helpful.
Yeah, I would say most of us who speak English have a pretty neutral accent. Actually, if you compare to the U.S., some people say we tend to have a Midwestern type of accent, so it's not like New York or Boston or Southern accent. That's in English, right? Portuguese is relatively easy to find because Portuguese is very similar to Spanish. So for us to learn Portuguese is relatively easy, but it's Brazilian Portuguese, right? For instance, I speak a little bit of Portuguese, and when I speak with people from Portugal, I don't understand a thing, right? So it's very different. And then when it comes to, let's say, German, there's a high quality German schools here, so the accent is very good. I also speak a little bit of German. French is definitely a challenge for Canadian French. So people who speak French here speak French, not Canadian French. So sometimes that's an issue when you try to provide services to the Canadian French speakers, right? But again, almost in any language that you can think of, the high quality of the schools, but then even in Spanish, we have a very neutral accent, right? So that makes it easier for us to not only deliver services in Spanish, obviously, but to pick up other languages as well.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I think part on the cost side, I think there are a lot of questions coming on the operating model front as well. And that's one of the aspects we also wanted to touch. So we have a question from Kashish here. around how are companies in Costa Rica dealing with back to office? Are they preferring
Okay.
hybrid, fully remote, or completely kind of an office model? So, if Anna, you could comment on
Mhm.
this from a broader industry standpoint, where do you see a lot of GBS companies operating?
So definitely, what is changing is the model. So we had work from home prior to the pandemic. So work from home was already in place. We even there's already a legislation around it to protect the employer around the whole work from home scheme. So it already existed. The companies had already put it in place. So when we had to move into a fully remote model in Costa Rica, it wasn't that complicated for the companies to do it because they had already done it in the past. Now that we're returning, what we're seeing is definitely the hybrid model is here to stay. The work from home used to be a benefit that companies actually gave to their employees. Is no longer a benefit. It's something that people will ask in their interviews if they how many days of work from home you provide, and it's part of the decision if I take this job or not, right? So definitely the hybrid model is here to stay. Now, what companies are providing is 2 days from the office, 3 days from home. It depends on the organization, the teams. They're redeploying their space. That's something very important. The space has changed now. Why it has to have a meaning to go back to the office. So
Mhm.
definitely, most of the companies are redeploying the space to make it a more collaborative space. And we're seeing also changes in the demand of space that new companies that are coming in are asking us. So how much space do you need? Probably is not the same numbers that we were talking in the past. So you don't need to have everyone at the office. But definitely most companies want people to get to know each other. They want to build up their teams and have those one-on-ones where you can see the people. So definitely we're not seeing the work from anywhere scheme that much that we were thinking during the pandemic. They're still working from Costa Rica, but they have more flexibility in their schedules, and they also have the possibility of having some days that they could actually be from home. One another interesting fact is that we're seeing more companies for certain very specific roles. They don't need them to come to the office like every month, like every day, every week, right? In a hybrid model. So they could actually hire people that are located in other regions of Costa Rica, like Guanacaste, Guanacaste, Punta Arenas, and others. And they just come once a month to the office for maybe a meeting with their team or something like that. So for certain roles, we're seeing that movement that are completely remote positions, but others, definitely the hybrid model is the one that we're seeing the most.
Got it. And Christian, a question to you, a related part on this is when you talk about hybrid model, we're seeing this across locations, right? I'm sure centers in different locations for Bacardi all are kind of gearing towards a hybrid model. Do you see any differences in the kind of adoption or how employees have seen it in different regions? Can you draw some comparisons as per how it was taken in Costa Rica versus, say, Poland, China, Barcelona, India?
Yeah, definitely. So I was lucky to be in India back in September visiting my team, and partly based on our office culture there, but also on people's preferences, they come to the office every single day, and that's not mandated. That's just
Mhm.
because they feel more comfortable, getting ready, getting out of the house, and seeing their colleagues, right? So that's very very specific to our daily office. In Poland, since it's a brand new office and it's in a very cool building right in downtown, close to bars and restaurants, and our employees for the most part are very young, even when it's again not mandated, they tend to come to the office 2 to 3 times a week. And so they want to enjoy the facilities and all of the perks that comes with with going to an office. Here in Costa Rica, where we have our largest operation, as Ana Maria said, there's plenty of nice places around the country you can work from remotely. So we in Bocardi, we say we don't sell spirits, we create moments to celebrate, right? So what we've instructed the teams to do is there's going to be basic guidelines as to moments you come to celebrate together in the office, but as a team, right? It doesn't make sense, for instance, if Anna and I belong to the same team, her coming to the office Monday and Tuesdays and me Wednesdays and Thursdays, that doesn't make sense. I mean, we would rather stay home, right? So we encourage teams to come together to the office as teams. And as a result of that, they're expected to come to the office approximately 6 times a month. But what we've seen is that on top of those 6 times a month, people choose to come voluntarily to the office uh, so in average, they're coming 8 to 10 times a month to the office, which is slightly higher than we expected. And again, it has to do with whether their home maybe is not as comfortable, or they just want to get out, they want to dress up, they want to come to the office. So for us, it's been a great experience, and people have expressed their satisfaction in having a hybrid yet very flexible model that essentially allows them to pick and choose when they want to come to the office.
And there are a couple of questions coming on this flexibility of work from home. So there's a question from Minor, from Daiki, or both kind of were putting together the same thing. Like, are there instances or facilities to enable
Okay.
working outside Costa Rica? Is that something which is accommodative? And that's a similar question we have from Daiki, Diaz as well.
I can
Yeah.
take those two. So in terms of working outside of the country, definitely no. I won't say that it's the trend, and I'm not saying that in most companies. There is like this benefit that some companies, not all of them, are providing, like you can work one month a year from anywhere, like go to somewhere and work from there, but it's very rare. So we are not seeing that. And then, so definitely it's people in Costa Rica that are working in a remote model, meaning they can move to the beach or they can move to another location. But if the role is there, if there is that possibility for the role, right? There are roles that definitely cannot do that remoteness, or even they cannot will do the whole work from home. We do have very sensitive functions that actually cannot be, they could not even have the hybrid model. They need to be full time at the office, right? So that is things that we need to consider, because the sensitivity of the information cannot be taken out. Okay, so that is one thing. Now bringing people in from other locations, that's a very interesting question. We have always received, there is no restrictions in terms of how many people you can bring from abroad. So definitely you can bring talent from other locations. In terms of immigration, they just need to be registered with a company. So they need to be employed by this company, and they need to comply with the immigration requirements that the country has. So they have to go through the whole immigration system, and they will have to apply for their residency visa or for their temporary visa to be able to work in Costa Rica. So those are the legalities, and we can, if Daki wants to go deeper on that, we can actually look at that. There are some countries that do require a specific visa to enter Costa Rica. So we will need to check. Those are the kind of questions that CINDE can actually answer companies if they're in need of understanding how it works. So definitely we can take it in a separate call, or maybe through LinkedIn, I could answer those questions separately, or see case by case on how we can support that. In terms of immigration policies, like I said, it's just having their permits, and it has to be sponsored by a company. Definitely people coming from Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, we will have to check if they need a specific visa. For the moment, I think those three countries don't need a visa to come into Costa
Mhm.
Rica, but if they're planning to work, they will need a work visa to be able to be here.
If I may, there are, for serious, well-established companies like Bacardi, there are legal and let's say tax implications of having somebody working outside of Costa Rica if they are employed by the Costa Rican legal entity, right? So I'll
Exactly.
just give you an example. The medical insurance benefit that we provide to all of our employees, if for some reason you're working outside of Costa Rica and you have an accident or an illness, there are legal consequences for that, because the insurance, as we have designed, is to be provided within Costa Rica, right? So in our case, but that doesn't mean we don't have alternatives, right? For instance, not long ago, I did have to create a legal entity in Panama to accommodate for a couple of our best people that have dual careers, and their spouses were being moved to Panama. So, I said, you can do the job from Panama, right? But let's do it the right way, which is setting up a legal entity, a cost center, set up your benefits, local payroll, all of those things. So, I mean, there are alternatives to that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, Anna, if you could answer the question that we received from Rita around impact sourcing. What trends are you seeing as far as impact sourcing, or basically employing people who are underprivileged or may not be able to otherwise work in the regular industries? Any comments on that?
So There is a huge one of the pillars of our new vision for the next 5 years for Cinde is definitely we're seeing a large unemployment, and I don't know if I'm answering the question, and please guide me if I'm not answering the question correctly, but definitely there is a high unemployment rate in areas outside of the metro area. So the services sector actually doesn't have a major unemployment problem, right? We see full employment in the sector. If you have good language capabilities, you have the skills, you will be able to find a job, right, in this industry. Now, when we're going outside of the metro area, we're seeing large numbers of unemployment and less access to some resources, right? So there is an interest from the government and from our agency to actually see how we can bring more companies to actually invest outside of the metro area. The issue with services sector is that the talent is not there. We need to start working on the talent skills to be able to say to a company to move to those areas and start providing employment. So that's why I was talking about the remote model, because if there's resources that you can actually hire in those areas, we will tend to help them with that. We're seeing more of this type of companies in the light manufacturing, the agro industry, more in those in that sense to have an easy target for companies to move in that area. And actually the benefits are very focused in that, the tax incentives. The tax incentives, if you have your operation outside of the metro area, will be you will have a lower level of investment, and your incentives will last longer. So definitely that's something we are taking under consideration. It's something we're working on, but definitely there's a pipeline of talent that we still need to develop in
Yeah.
those areas to be able to move services companies into those
I
regions.
would say the services industry here has been very powerful in terms of being egalitarian, inclusive, diverse, etc. So, for instance, in our particular case, over half of our leadership staff is female. A big majority, probably 80 to 85% of the people we hire come from the public educational system. So these are people who, by having access to public education, which is free in Costa Rica, and then having access to jobs in companies like ours, go up the career and socioeconomic ladder. We don't discriminate based on age or any other factor. Actually, we pride ourselves in having a few primos, as we call ourselves, which is cousins in Spanish, that are over 60, 65 years old, and they are enjoying their careers with us. And lately, we've made a conscious effort to also bring people with certain types of disabilities or special abilities. So, for instance, we have one lady who is legally blind, and we made the accommodations for her to be able to aspire to have a career that otherwise it wouldn't be accessible for her. So, that's something that I think both the companies take very seriously from a cultural and hiring practices perspective, but also the market and the country provides for that access. As I said, for instance, from public education to a corporate job in one of the companies.
One program that has a very large impact there is the technical high schools. People that go into a technical high schools, these are students that come from less privileged families. So actually they become the main source of income for many, for their parents or for their brothers and sisters. So definitely that's a program that it has a lot of impact. And that's a way we have found to actually cut the poverty rate in most of the country. So definitely these kids, they're at 18-year-olds, they graduate with already a specialization, they start working with multinational companies, and actually they start becoming their support for the whole household. So that is a very important program that we have, and it's one of the most successful ones. And I can talk more about that in other conversations, but that's.
And Anna, are you saying that these students, these graduates also get deployed in the GBS sector, services sector?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, because the specializations. So what we have done is that we have created specializations that go according to what the industry requires. In the past, most of the specializations was keen on agriculture and more on the light manufacturing areas. But now, for example, these kids graduate from finance and accounting, contact center executive, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and software development, networking. So definitely these are areas where they can get hired. And we have a program that it's called Tools for Success in CINDE. So companies can actually sponsor the language classes for these kids. So they give like a scholarship for them to take the English classes. So when they graduate, they're fully bilingual and they're ready to start working in a company.
Great. I think we have had a wonderful discussion. We have been live for 1 hour now, and we are still getting, we got
A
a lot
lot
of
of questions.
questions. Yeah, I think we should wrap up now. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Christian, for
Thank
sparing
you.
time and sharing all your experience and insights with our audience. We have already started getting, congratulatory messages that people really like the discussion. There were questions around how people can access the recording. So the recording will be available on LinkedIn as soon as the event closes. And I think Anna and Christian's contact details or LinkedIn details will also be there in case people want to connect with them offline. And so is the case for Parul and my contact. In case you have questions regarding locations, Costa Rica, beyond Costa Rica, this is the service that we definitely provide at Everest Group, and happy to answer any further questions. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
once again. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Bye.